The Logitech G710 Blue versus the G.Skill KM780RGB. More money for RGB. I'm Rio Gion and welcome to Rio Gion Keyboards. Unlike the comparison before, this one is more apples to apples because both keyboards are plus size keyboards with extra features on top of it. Both keyboards have macro keys, volume wheel, dedicated media controls, profile controls, lighting settings, and detachable wrist rests. The G710 looks more professional in a sense, but both keyboards are clearly leaning towards gamers. The KM780 has the floating key design which makes the keyboard easier to clean, while the G710 has an enclosed design which can be harder to clean, and the glossy plastic can attract dust very easily. Both keyboards does not have the standard layout, which can be hard to find keycaps replacement for, but the KM780 is especially hard because of that 5.5U spacebar. If you don't plan on replacing the keycaps, then the layout shouldn't really matter that much to you. Both keyboards are not office friendly because of the switch, and they both scream gaming keyboards, which will attract attention. So if you like attention, then by all means. But if you want something that's a little bit under the radar, then these two keyboards are not for you. Another thing that they have in common is that despite being gaming keyboards, the keycaps have professional font, which I thought was great. But looking at the whole picture, it seems a little bit off because the rest of the keyboard is so gamer friendly. I believe that the G710 has a slightly smaller footprint than the KM780 because of those bars on the side. Then again, these are plus size keyboard, so if you want a keyboard with a smaller footprint, these keyboards should not be on your list. If you're new to the channel and haven't subscribed yet, then hit that subscribe button to get the latest content. Both keyboards uses Cherry MX switches, which are proven to last the 50mm, and they're made from a big name switch manufacturer, so they are safer than clone switches for the most part. The reason why I say for the most part is that the RGB blue switch did have problems when they first released it in the K70RGB, but now they should be able to fix most if not all of those problems, because I'm starting to see that they are releasing more RGB blue switches in the market. The G710 just have the regular MX blue, which in theory should be more reliable than the RGB blue, but since it's an old keyboard, they have that small LED light bulb on top of the switch instead of inside the switch, so it makes me feel like I'm hitting the lights every time I press the keys. I hope that this is not true, because if it is, then the reliability of the keyboard might be compromised. Both keyboards uses Cherry MX stabilizers, which are very easy to clean because you don't need to take out the wires for the longer keys like the Co-Star stabilizers. The downside to having Cherry MX stabilizers is that the longer keys might not feel as good or as precise as the Co-Star stabilizers. If you don't tend to take out the keycaps on your keyboard, then the Co-Star stabilizers is the way to go. But if you do clean your keyboard often or replace keycaps, then you should go with Cherry MX stabilizers. The wrist rests on both keyboards are hard plastic, which I am not a big fan of, and they use the hooks to keep them in place, which can be broken pretty easily if you're not too careful. One thing I have to note is that the wrist rest on the KM780 feels like it's more expensive than the G710 because the wrist rest was able to hold itself in place when moving the keyboard around. The same cannot be said with the G710 because the wrist rest detaches itself when lifting the keyboard. On the bright side, the wrist rest on the G710 can be detached pretty easily, while the KM780 you have to be careful because using too much force could mean you're breaking it, but using too little force could mean you'll never be able to take it out. Both keyboards uses thin ABS keycaps, which is typically found on gaming keyboards. Since both of these keyboards have premium price tags, you would expect them to have higher quality keycaps, especially the KM780, but it is how it is because I don't think the typical gamer would care much for more premium keycaps. The good things about these keycaps is that they are clean on the inside, which means that the manufacturer put more time on quality control and the font looks great on both of them. So in a sense, you get some, you lose some. Both keyboards' flip-up feet does not have rubber on them, so they will be planted if you don't angle them upwards. Both keyboards come with USB pass-through, which is great because personally I use the USB pass-through quite often. Only the KM780 have audio pass-through, so if you want audio pass-through, then the KM780 is the one to go with. But the G710 have cable management slots for your headphones, so it really depends on how you want to route your headphones. The KM780 also have this little plastic piece that can sort of act as your mouse bungee, which could be extremely useful for particular gaming setups. Personally, I don't use it because I can definitely see the value for those of you that do use it. The G710 has cable management Velcro, which I have grown to love because it makes it so much easier to wrap the keyboard when I no longer use it. The KM780 has braided cable with gold-plated USB, so some of you may like this combination, but I believe that most of you are leaning towards rubber cable with silver tip USB. So if the cable and USB tip matters to you, you can get one or you can get the other. The reason why you're paying more money for the KM780 is the lighting. With the KM780RGB, you get to customize lighting on every single key, even the dedicated control keys. While on the G710, you are stuck with white, which isn't a bad color for a single LED keyboard. You are paying about 60% more money when you're picking the KM780RGB over the G710, but of course pricing is always subject to change, so I will put links to the keyboard below that like button for you to check out. In terms of the brightness, from my eyes, I'm seeing the G710 being brighter, and one thing to note is that the KM780 doesn't really get white correctly like most RGB boards. On the KM780, it seems like the white has a reddish pinkish hue, which can be turned off for those of you that like to set white as your lighting of choice for your RGB keyboards. If you want white to be your backlight, then the G710 is the perfect keyboard for the job because it does white really well. The G710 does have a software, but it's optional since most of the things you want to do with the keyboard, you have the options of setting it without the usage of the software. On the other hand, you need the software for the KM780 because there isn't a way to set up the lighting without it. One thing I have to mention is that the software on the KM780 is improving, and they are slowly but surely getting better as time passes, which is great because this means that the developers are not leaving their consumers in the dust after they're releasing the keyboard. Both softwares are user-friendly, so you can pretty much do the things that you wanted to do without looking up an online guide or consulting the manuals. For the KM780, since it's RGB, I wish if you have more layerings of lighting effects, because it would mean that you have more options to customize your lighting modes. Also, I want a strong community behind the software because there's import-export options for the lighting profiles, but I can't find any custom lighting profiles for the keyboards online. Hopefully, with the passage of time, things will change. One thing to note for the G710 is that you can macro only the G keys, while on the KM780, you can macro every single key, which does make a huge difference depending on how you want to use the keyboard. I'm also hoping that there's a software patch where you can macro every single key on the G710. On the KM780, the typing experience is greatly enhanced when putting the wrist rests on. I think the reason behind this is that your hand is leveled with the keyboard. Since the keyboard is higher up than most keyboards in the market, when not using the wrist rest, it feels like you have to arc your hands when typing, which makes me feel like I'm stomping on the keys instead of gliding through them. The keyboard feels much more approachable when the wrist rest is put on, and I feel like I can type on this keyboard for longer durations. On the G710, the typing experience is also enhanced with the included wrist rest, but it's not as big of a difference because I believe that the regular blue switches are softer than the RGB blue switches. It also sounds different, and I'll give you a link to the typing sound comparison for both of these keyboards in the description box below. Personally, I would pick the G710 over the KM780 for typing because I like to type on softer switches than stiffer switches. If you are a more heavy-handed typer, then go with the KM780. If you want to type on a lighter feeling keyboard, then go with the G710 Blue. Both keyboards are great for MMO gamers and video editors because you can set macros, but at this point I believe the KM780 is better than the G710 because you can macro every single key. If you mainly play FPS, then both of these keyboards are not a good fit for you because I believe that going with a red switch will give you the best experience when playing FPS. RTS gamer, then the ability to macro keys could be useful to you. Both keyboards have their ups and downs. With the mechanical keyboard market, it's a series of give and take. So here's the bottom line.